It's a great opportunity. Today, we are going to speak to one of the great persons in the sphere of podcasting and how to launch, how to create, how to publish, how to do everything with podcasting. Harry, could you please introduce yourself and what do you do for business?
Hey, Nour, thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. I appreciate everyone taking the time to listen, whether they're listening now or listening at some point in the future. Um, I've been a podcaster since 2014. I have a show called Podcast Junkies. The word in English is meta. It's a bit meta. It's a podcast about podcasting. So there are conversations with other podcasters. I went to a podcasting conference and I had an original idea. I thought I was gonna interview DJs because I love electronic music, but I quickly changed when I saw I wanted to tell the stories of these podcasters because sometimes you hear like what they want you to hear on their shows, but then you have to really ask them, when the lights are off, what's the true story? Like, why did you start the show? Like, what inspires you? And so I've been doing that since 2014, and then in 2015 I created or founded a podcast production company called Fullcast, and I'm the founder and CEO of that company. I've been doing that, and we help business owners set up, produce, and market their authority building podcasts.
And so, what do you do in this company? What do you do on it exactly?
When I started, I did everything. So I had been doing my show, Podcast Junkies, for a year. I hired a business coach, and I realized there's a need if you're a business owner where you have to figure out when you're growing as a business, it's important to find out like the who, not the how. Is one of the examples I love my coach uses. Like, who can do this for me? Like, who can help me? Not how do I do it myself? Because these people that are now friends of mine, they didn't get to where they are building six-figure and seven-figure businesses by doing all the work themselves. So I created my offering, Fullcast, as done for you. So all you have to do is record the audio, you place it into like a Dropbox folder, and then we edit it. We write show notes. We post the show notes to your website. We'll create graphics. We'll create an animated audiogram. We'll log into all your social channels, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and we'll promote the podcast episode for you on those channels. So it looks like you're just recording one piece of content, but then it's our responsibility as our business, as my company, like to make sure that podcast is found on as many platforms as possible. When we do the setup and launch, we're launching an Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. There's a lot of little moving parts that most new podcasters don't understand. And so we hold their hands along the way, like which microphone to use, like how often should I record, what's the format of my episode, what type of music should I use, where do I find this music, how do I submit to Apple, like a lot of moving parts. And I imagine if you're discovering the world of podcasting, you can probably relate to that as well.
Yeah. And what was your podcast about? Who are your audience? What is your input?
My personal podcast is I actually speak to people in the podcasting community. There's this phrase in English called scratch your own itch. Like, I wanted to learn about these podcasters. Like, I was naturally like, I wanted to create the show that I wanted to hear. So I said, I would love to learn because I'm starting a show, like what a successful podcaster does. What's the best way to do that? You interview them. And so in the world of a business, and maybe you've experienced this on LinkedIn, when people say, hey, Noor, can I pick your brain? That means, hey, can I get some free consulting? Or,
True.
hey, can we grab a coffee or something like that? But what I found is if you have a podcast, I always tell people a podcast is great if you want to build your business, but it's also a fantastic networking tool. So I said, hey, Noor, I have this podcast where I'm talking to some of the most interesting business owners from the internationally, so, and I have never spoken to anyone like, from Egypt. So I want to speak to this person. I want to invite you to my show and be my guest for an hour. Is that okay? Would you do that?
Mhm.
Whatever your position is, you're going to feel like your ego is like, yes, I would love this opportunity to have this platform. So it's all in how you tell people about the opportunity. And that's why, like, if you're looking to grow, and this is probably something you're experiencing, but if you're looking to grow your visibility or grow your connections in a specific field, start a podcast. I tell people that all the time.
Yeah, certainly. And what is the authority building podcast?
The reason I use that phrase is because I really feel, and this is why we focus when we build shows for clients, that a podcast is a really strong opportunity as a business owner for you to demonstrate authority. So as an authority building podcast, like when you're first getting started, if all you do is like blog or you just have a static website, people will see that and maybe learn something about you. But there's something very powerful about communicating your offering, your business, your story in the form of your voice and telling people and having, because there's something powerful when you can hear emotion, you can hear tone, and you're taking people on a journey. Some of the best podcasts are tell stories, because people, this is something that's universal across the world. Like, people love stories. Stories are how traditions are handed down to us. And so to the extent that you can incorporate the stories, then you can tell people who you are, you can tell people about why you started the podcast, and then you can start to tell people about your business and what you do and who you help and who you serve. And as you start to do this, as you might imagine, or if people listen to that podcast on a consistent basis, they're going to say, wow, Noor, he really knows his stuff. Like, every time I listen, I feel like I'm learning more. And so they now position you as the authority in that specific space.
What are the main lessons you have learned through this podcast journey?
I think it's important to be your true self and to have an authentic voice, and to not be afraid of, telling people like the good and the bad, like, or introducing a bit of your personal personality into the show. We always tell clients, like, when you're recording podcast episodes, tell people a little bit about your day. We just started the conversation here about the election in the US, right? We're recording this in November of 2020 because, we're all, at the end of the day, Nor, it's human to human. Like, you don't, when you buy something from someone, you're buying from like a faceless corporation. There's a different feeling than when you give, money to a merchant on the street and you're exchanging that good for, there's something, you're having an interaction with another human being. And that's why I think it's what I find one of the things about podcasts, they're so powerful because you have that opportunity. I'm speaking to you directly into your ear. Like, podcasts are very intimate. I always say, um, when you have a podcast, don't say, hey, everyone, thank you for being on the show. Like, you're on stage. You're not on stage. You're speaking to one person at a time. So when I direct something and I want to have the listener listen to something, I say, hey, I'm talking to you, the listener, listening to me right now on this podcast, and just reminding people, like, I'm having a one, I may have hundreds or thousands of listeners, but in that moment, I'm having a one-to-one conversation with you.
Yeah, sure. And how much success have you achieved through this podcast?
I mean, I would probably say that starting a podcast is one of the best things I've ever done for myself personally, and for my business, because for me it's a bit like a spiral, because I have a podcast where I interview podcasters and I have a podcast production company. But if you think about when I first got started with my show, nobody knew who I was, and all I had was my corporate experience. I've been in corporate. I worked at a company called E-Trade, JP Morgan Chase. I've been in finance and marketing for almost 20 years. But then moving into becoming an entrepreneur, I was starting all over again. So I made sure that when I did my podcast interviews, I did them face to face. I mean, and face to face, like a Zoom or Skype. And we use another tool called Squadcast now, which gives you a higher quality audio. And there's something powerful about having a face to face conversation with somebody for like an hour. And then when I would go to the conferences, they would be like, hey, Harry, that was a really good conversation. You really asked some good questions. I really enjoyed it. And now you're building a friendship. I have a mantra that I say is, I always want to treat my guests like gold, and because I want to build relationships. And when I go into a conversation with someone, I'm preparing myself to this be a lifelong relationship. And most of the times it probably won't be. But if you go into it with that intention, if you think about it, Nora, like the energy you bring into a conversation when you think about, I would like to be friends with this person for life, it's very
Sure.
different than transactional, where you're like, okay, I'm going to just do the questions he asked me, and I'm going to try to get out as fast as possible, and I'm just going to get what I need and then go. It's what we call transactional. And I'm more, I think about these relationships as investing and building lifelong relationships. And so, because I've done that since 2014, I now have some authority in the podcasting space. I have people coming to me to want to be on my show, and I continue to do that, and it keeps me humble as well because I need to practice. How do I connect with this person today? How do I connect with this person today? And it's a lifelong skill that you'll. It's one of those skills that you'll takes. I don't know. I forgot what the saying is, but it takes a lifetime to master.
Sure, sure. I understand. You decided to write a book. Why did you write the book, and what is the book about?
So one of the important things in the world of digital marketing is when you create a piece of content, because you put a lot of effort into that content. In the case of a podcast interview, you want to share it as many places as possible. And you think, oh, it's audio, I need to share it in another audio format. But you can take a podcast episode and you can transcribe it, right? So then you have the written version of it. You can take a podcast episode and pull out little snippets of audio and make that into like a little audiogram that you can share on Twitter and on Instagram. And so now people can listen to audio on Twitter and Instagram. Or you can write the full transcription of it and create like a nice PDF document, or you can take screenshots of you and your guest and share that on social media. So you're always looking for ways to repurpose it. And so one of the things that I was thinking about when I first started and launched my show was how can I take those interviews and pull out like the best pieces of those first 25 interviews. And so the book is called Around the Podcast Campfire. And we would take, I helped with, someone helped me with the proofreading. So I paid someone to help me edit the transcripts and say, okay, what are the five best stories around social media? What are the five best stories around equipment? What are the five best stories around format? And so, we put it together in like a month or two. And it's a nice way to have something to write about, because I think authors think, oh, I need to come up with something original that no one's ever seen before. But if I would think most people that are watching or listening have created content that you could repurpose into a book. And I still don't have the hard copy, but it's a digital version. It's a Kindle version, but it's an important thing to do because it then makes you visible on the Amazon platform as well. So always be thinking about like what can I create once and then repurpose multiple times.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, this question about the finances. How do you pick your customers, or do your clients pick you?
A lot of my business comes through referrals. And I think because I started working with a business coach early on, some of my early clients came from people who were clients of his. And so I think about um, how can I provide the best service to this other client who is also a business owner. So when I think about that, as you know, you and I noticed, we met on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn because I believe that's a lot of where business to business happens. And so but what I tried to do is lead with value and lead with offering something that you know, people can find helpful. So one of the important things you need as a business owner is a way for people to continue to follow you or to learn more about you. There's a thing called a lead magnet. So if people go to the website fullcast.co/game plan, they get a one-page PDF, and it's all the things you need to learn at a high level of how to start a podcast. Again, it's not supposed to be an ebook. It's not supposed to be this long thing you read, but it demonstrates that you know what you're talking about. And then when people sign up for that, they get put on my email list. And then I start to nurture. There's a 4-part welcome sequence that says, hey, this is how I started. This is why I started the show. Again, I'm trying to make that human to human connection. And then I just continue to email people once a week about what I'm doing, what I'm working on. So sometimes people will buy from you that moment saying, hey, yes, I'm ready for what you have right now, or it could be a year from now. And so you have to have these things in place to nurture that relationship so that when people are ready, they've been seeing your emails, they're like, oh, I'm thinking about a podcast and I've been getting these newsletters from Harry like every week. He can probably help me. Let me reach out to him. So having those things in place where you can continue to nurture people, I post like that authority building article on LinkedIn, how to launch your podcast. Like figure out what you want to be known for and then start to develop content around that, and that's how you begin to attract your ideal client.
What do you need your clients to understand before coming to you?
They should have an understanding and a commitment to be consistent with their content. We do the beauty of our service is that we do a lot of the heavy lifting. So all they have to do is record, and then we take care of everything else. But even that consistency, like, are you going to record? Are you going to create multiple episodes? You don't have to create them every week. You can create four, in 1 month, and then you have your whole month's content taken care of. But we sign agreements with clients, new clients, for 12 months. Like, we want them to say, like, look, we're making an agreement here in writing that we're going to be working together. So that puts the pressure on them to say, okay, I need to find something to talk about week over week. And so we help them with like ideas on how to do interview shows or do solo shows. But I always think about what can I do to make sure that my client is succeeding and continuing to produce content. Because if they're not producing content, there'll be nothing to create a podcast episode, and then they wouldn't have a need for our service. So I'm always putting them in a position to succeed. But I do need that commitment from the clients to say, yes, I have something to say, and I can be consistent, and I can teach, and I can show people like my value.
And what are the main mistakes like the clients can do?
In the beginning, when it comes to podcasting clients, a lot of they a lot of clients to that point, they don't have a plan, like they don't know what they're going to talk about, and that probably wouldn't be a good fit for us. Other things like the equipment, they think that they can just talk into their laptop and then everything will be fine. There's a big difference. Right now there's 1.4 million podcasts in the Apple podcast directory, so there's a lot of competition, as you might imagine. So you need a way to set yourself apart from everybody else. Like, you need to say, like, and if, nor if you've listened to any podcast, you can tell who takes it seriously and who doesn't. Like, who's taking the time to record something that makes sense and has good quality audio. And I think those little things, like, know what you're going to talk about, have a format for your show, take your listener on a journey, respect your listener's time. Like, these are the little things you can do. There's no one like silver magic bullet that's going to take care of everything, but you need to do all the little things. And that's how we created our offer, because we want to help our clients do all those little things, but we also want them to be consistent. And I think the biggest mistakes early on is they think it's something they can just do casually. And so you really have to have an intention about why you're doing the show. Like, who is the show for? Like, we ask clients when we start, who is the show for? Why are you the best person to teach this content? And what do you want a listener to do as a result of having listened to the episode? So, we want people to be like, have, an intention of why they want to do that. And they should bring that to every episode.
Do you think you are the best person to teach people about podcasting?
Um, I think I am a great person to teach people about podcasting. I don't know who is the best or who can actually claim the title of best, but I will tell you that we take a lot of pride in what we do. I have a passion for podcasting that goes back even before podcasting, because I grew up DJing vinyl turntables. Like, so I have a passion for entertaining, for helping control the mood of a party. And that sometimes I think about podcasting the same way. Like, what do I want a listener to feel? What do I want my clients listeners to feel? And so I'm always thinking about ways to do that. I have a podcast where I interview podcasters. So we produce shows for podcasts. I subscribe to podcast newsletters, so I eat, sleep, and breathe it, because I'm extremely passionate that I feel like every single person has a voice that needs to be heard by your audience. And what I don't want to happen is, like, for people to like live their whole lives and then feel like they died, and they had that voice inside of them that they couldn't get out.
Let's get into some technicalities. How to choose a name for a podcast?
So you may be familiar with the concept of search engine optimization, SEO, which is really important, because when people just get started in digital marketing, they're writing blog posts and they're picking a title for their blog post, like the 5 best ways to travel internationally or something like that. You want the title of the episode, I mean, the title of the blog post in that example, to get people excited. Like, oh, I want to learn about that specific thing. So that's the same thing we think about in podcasting. When you're titling your podcast episodes, um, the best ways to travel, in internationally on a $100 budget or something like that. So they're like, oh wow, I want to listen to that episode. And then that also applies to the name of the show. When people see the name of a show, like, they should immediately understand what that show's about. I like to use the example of my partner. She's a photographer. She coaches other photographers on how to build a photography business. So we call the show Photo Business Help. So it's you see the name in the show, and you're like, oh, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to get. We have another client who helps teach about investing. We've called the show Understanding Investing. Like it's sometimes people try to have a cute name or like, the two fantastic guys or something like that. That's a fun name, but no one's going to see that and say, oh, I want to listen to that. Like it should evoke like an emotional response when you see the title and be like, oh, I need that show. I need that show because I need what that promise of what that title is going to deliver.
And what to think about when the podcaster or the producer wants to publish their podcast?
Like what specifically they should think about in terms of like when or where to publish.
Yeah, yes.
Um, yeah, the idea really is like when you have that episode ready, you want to make sure it's found on every single platform that you have access to. And I know in the beginning, some people will say, I'm not on Twitter or I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook. But thankfully, with what we do as the business, we make sure that they're going to be on all those platforms because Noor, if I ask you what's your favorite social media platform, what would you say?
Facebook.
Okay, Facebook. So you're active on Facebook. So maybe you're not active on Twitter, you're not active on Instagram or Pinterest, but that doesn't mean people are not having the conversation about your topic on those platforms. So it's
Mhm.
important, and I know as a solo podcaster sometimes it's a challenge, but there are tools where you can do some scheduling of social media posts, and you want to try to at least have a presence. And remember that Google is now indexing podcasts. So if you have the proper search engine terms, people are going to find your show through Google searches as well.
Great. How to promote the show or the podcast?
Yeah, the most important thing is to create artwork for each specific episode because that way, if you have like 100 episodes, you don't want to just use the cover art because then it's like the same graphic, the same graphic, the same graphic. So create different graphics for each episode, and like I just mentioned earlier, make sure you have a clean website where people can find the show, and then find a way to promote it on all the different platforms. If you have a guest on, you should be sending an email to your guest and say, hey, Nour, thank you so much for having me on your show. Here are all the places that I promoted your episode. Here's the artwork that I created. Please share this with your audience. A lot of times, new podcasters, they want to have a guest on and then they say, hey, Nour, my episode is ready. Can you please promo it? Make sure you promo it to everybody. And that's it. You don't give them any information. And so, like, you're busy. You don't have time to be like promoting all the shows you were on. So make it easy for your guests to help you. Say, hey, look, I want you to promote it. This is the copy you should use. This is the graphic you should use. And these are the places you can post it if you want to. So really like hold their hand and say, I'm really grateful to you for being on the show. And I'm showing you my gratitude because I'm going to make it easy for you to promote it as well.
Yeah, perfect. And where to host a podcast?
There's so many. There's probably about 20 podcast hosting services, but some of the companies that have been around for a while. There's one called Simplecast that we use. It's a very easy name to remember. Simplecast. They make it really easy for you to start a show. Then there's a couple of other companies that have been around for a while. Libsyn, Libsyn, is a popular hosting company, and I've used that early on. But there's other great services like Captivate and Transistor, which provide really good reporting as well. So any one of those shows, any one of those podcast hosts would be a great place to start.
So my understanding that you understand the technicalities, the specialities, every like tiny details about what you're doing. How much do you study or how much do you prepare to understand your business?
It feels like it's a lifelong journey, right? Because the industry is changing so quickly. I listen to a pod newsletter called Pod News. It's a daily newsletter about the podcasting industry. I listen to podcasts about podcast advertising because I want to learn how that industry works. So, wherever your business is, if you want to, this goes for anyone that's listening, no matter what you want to learn. There's probably a podcast about the topic that is your business, and it's your responsibility. If I'm producing shows for clients, like it's my responsibility to be on top of what's happening in the industry. Like, is something happening with Apple? Spotify just created a new deal where they're giving Joe Rogan $100 million. Like, why is that important? Is there new tools for advertising? Are there new apps that people are using? Like, I always have to stay on top of the industry because I want to show my clients and my coaching students that I know what's happening, and I can help them, because if I can shorten the learning curve for them, that's where the value comes for me. That's why they want to pay me as a producer or as a coach, because I'm going to save them time. And the longer you've been in business, you realize what an hour of your time is worth. And so, you should value that. And if you can find someone that can help you get to that journey, take that journey and get you there faster, then that's what I'm always thinking about, to always be learning, like always have the eternal student mindset, and especially with technology related industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. What else would you like to add about podcasting today?
I think that one of the things that people say, like, what's the best time to start a podcast? People say yesterday. And then what's the second best time to start a podcast? Today. I think people overthink, what topic should I talk about? Your tenth podcast episode is going to sound better than your first. Your 50th is going to sound better than your 10th. Your 100th is going to sound better than your 50th, because you have to get better and better and better. And like anything, any other skill, whether it's cooking, sports, like, you have to practice. You have to practice. And podcasting is no different. So, like, don't overthink it. Even if you're starting and you want to record on your iPhone, your episodes, you don't have to play them for anyone. I think people sometimes think, I'm going to record an episode and like someone's going to hear it. The only way someone's going to hear it is if you publish it. So don't worry about that. Like, but work that muscle, like practice speaking into a microphone, practice teaching someone a topic that you enjoy, practice coaching somebody for free. In the beginning, you have to do a lot of this for free. But like everything else, like put in the repetitions, and you'll find over time that you're going to continue to get better and better and better.
Yeah, it has been amazing talking to you, Harry, today. I really cannot appreciate your input enough. That's really amazing. Thank you so much indeed for that.
Thank you, Noor. And if anyone, obviously needs help from a coaching perspective, I can provide links for you if that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you
Yeah.
again.
Okay. Thanks, Noor.